Hello, welcome to the Red Room. Today we're going to talk about our new game, setting, Wretched Interbellum. But also we want to talk about historically accurate settings and the importance of having them or not.
Something I wrote about today. A post on Twitter and the blog and Facebook and etc. So, okay, let's start by talking about the news. There's a new game, game setting. There's a new game setting which is called Wretched Interbellum. We have talked about it for some times in the past. I think it was named during a live stream. Yes, we were talking about the idea of doing something. Yes, it was Judd that recommended Interbellum as a name for that. I don't know what were we.
Nothing. We were just saying it was just the period between wars.
Yeah, period between wars. So it's the other option might be maybe interwar, Wretched Interwar. Well, it's Interbellum. Sounds better. And so, what is Interbellum? Interbellum is a game setting for Wretched that takes place between the end of World War I, 1919, and the beginning of World War II in 36. There's a period there that's, if you take this as a sequel to Wretched Epoch, there's a small period there, 4 years, that is almost ignored, which is the Great War.
Though we do have some references in the book about the history, how it came, how the Great War came.
It's not entirely ignored. It's just not a book about the war, so it's but we mentioned the war.
Mention the war.
We did mention the war, so you can use this as a source book for the war as well. But yes, the time is the same. The rules will be similar.
And it is mentioned in the book that the how do you call it? Trenches. It's a very good setting for survival.
Yes.
Or
yes, there's plenty of mentions to that, to the war itself and the consequences. So if you want to set it in the war, there are also tables for some mental and physical issues that could have happened in the war. So that could be during the war, not necessarily after, because people were hurt and shell shocked. So, and there are rules for shell shock and slightly different rules for mental balance and fear. So sanity and fear rules are slightly adapted to the time and to the particular events of the war and the consequences of the war. So you can use it during the war or after the war. That's up to you. But the idea is to place it in the 20s or the 30s or both. So it's a long period of time, not as long as the Belle Epoque.
But a lot of things happened in that 2 decades.
Yeah, probably more than the previous 3 or 4 decades.
Yes, a lot of things happened in the Belle Epoque also, but it's,
but
if we compare,
lots of things happened. There were many changes and probably, but there wasn't.
There's also a difference between Interbellum and Wretched Epoch. Wretched Epoch, obviously, the setting is very focused in Paris. When in Interbellum, you are covering different.
Second edition has more.
Yes, but still, the idea is it is to be played in Paris.
Belle Epoque is something that.
When in Interbellum, we touch with other locations.
Yes, of course, it's just a slight touch over different places because it will be impossible to cover everything, the whole world, in 2 decades that are 2 very interesting and important decades. So what did we do? We decided to focus on some places that are usually not that much focused. And before we go into that, I will show you the main inspiration for this.
That was actually what gave the idea to the.
Not just this book, but probably this is the most famous, The Ballad of the Salty Sea. It's a graphic novel by, the French call it bande dessinée, we call it banda desenhada in Portuguese. there's no name for that in English, but
The
there should
graphic
be.
novel is not exactly the same.
Yeah, it's not exactly the same, but let's call it a graphic novel. So this was written in the 70s, and it's about, okay, so the main character is this dude
Corto
here,
Maltese.
which is called Corto Maltese, is a sailor, is a Maltese, of course, and a half Maltese, half Italian. No, there's three Fs. He's also gypsy. So 1/3 each, I think.
Well, maybe he's a gypsy from Spain. No, from Italy.
Yes,
But he's actually
Italian
half
gypsy, yeah. So he's a half Italian gypsy, half Maltese, or maybe he's a
Maltese
gypsy. I
gypsy.
don't know. Well, anyway, that's it. He's Italian and he's gypsy. With the sailor in an adventurer, and these graphic novels or stories are about obviously adventures, and they take place in several times, but between First World War and Second World War. So this is the right place for it, and the right time, not the place, but right time. The places, and that's where I wanted to go. This one takes place in the South Pacific. There are some stories in Brazil, in the Caribbean. There are several in the Caribbean, several in the South Pacific, and several in Brazil, but also in Venice and Spain, Russia, and can't remember anything else, but probably somewhere else. It's not like Tintin. It's a little less. It's not like he goes. He goes every book. He goes somewhere. No, there are several stories taking place in the same location. I call him Tintin, but that's the French name. How do the English
I
call
have
him?
no idea. Tintin.
Okay, so
Tintin. We call him Tintin.
Yeah, but in English it should be, well, anyway, it's
Tintin.
the journalist with the stupid hair.
I think he has the same name.
Should be Tintin probably.
Yes.
Well, anyway. So, but this is a little bit more adult and
Yes.
Les Aventures de Tintin. And also it's Italian. As usual, we rip off the Italians. I don't know why, but we always rip off on the Italians. Well, because they are good to rip off.
So there's a big part about naval combat and sailing.
Yes, obviously in this case, well, not really naval combat, but yes, plenty of sailing, since the man is a sailor. And that's why it's always taking place in port, in places where there are ports, because that's.
Yes, there's plot hooks in the different port cities.
So, and I did the same. So in this writing, I chose several places that because some of the plot hooks, and there are big plot hooks and small plot hooks. The larger plot hooks, most of them are inspired by stories by Hugo Pratt, which is the author. Not all of them, most of them. So that's the Caribbean have several plot hooks in our Wretched setting. Brazil as well. You have several for the Pacific, the South Pacific. Those were slightly modified not to look like exactly like Corto Maltese, because I was talking to Jed and he was suggesting that for the American audience, maybe I should take a look at South Pacific movies, of which I'm not really a fan, but I know what it is. So I slightly changed that to sound a little bit more like 40s movies. And that's it. South Pacific as well. Obviously, Africa.
In the Mediterranean.
And yes, the Mediterranean. Yes, that's still Corto Maltese in the Mediterranean. So, and obviously, I had to give some attention to Spain because there's the Civil War, and obviously Hemingway needs to be an inspiration for this, and he was there, so wrote about it. There was a reporter and a writer, of course. He wrote about the conflict, the Spanish Civil War, and the Spanish Civil War is very important at this time. It's the prequel to the World War that came next, and there were not just Hemingway, other people there, many Americans, intellectuals, left-wingers probably.
They were also well in Paris before.
Sorry.
They were a lot. Most of them are in Paris before.
Yes, yes,
That was the place
Paris,
to be
obviously.
for the writers.
Yes, yes.
It
So
doesn't have a lot dedicated to it, but it has. It's not as much as Epoch, but of
not
course,
as much, yes,
it's
but
still
some
important.
references because the Roaring Twenties in Europe. You should also take a look at Paris, obviously, cabarets and all that. But there's plenty of information about it in Belle Epoque, and the places are mostly the same. So you just have to
Change the
slightly
hairstyles.
change, yeah, slightly change the hairstyles, and the cabarets are the same. But now there are American artists there as well. There's what's she's called, the black singer,
Josephine
Baker. And there's jazz, and that's it. Okay, so these were the main places that we focused on. We didn't focus a lot on the US, though there's a chapter about the US and what was happening there. So, but you probably most of you are Americans, so I'm not going to tell you your own history. So.
But there's something extra
prohibition
that you
and
talked about, something interesting. Well, Germany.
Oh yes, I was leaving that to the end because that's the. It's not really that I like that for reasons. I don't really like that time. That's not something that I would enjoy. I would certainly not enjoy being there because sometimes I feel like I'm in there. It smells like wokeism a lot, but yeah, okay. So Weimar Republic, it's wretched, so it had to be included. So I did a large chapter about that, and there are many plot hooks for that, and tables for encounters and all that. That's something that this one has probably more than the previous ones. Table for encounters. You have tables for encounters in the sea, at ports, rumors, stuff for the Weimar Republic that involves drugs, hookers, sex, and gambling. And there's an adventure generator at the end of the book with that kind of thing that comes in an adventure generator. Place, characters, MacGuffins, whatever. Okay, let's try to focus again on this. Okay, places. So these are the places that are mostly focused on this, at least for now. There will be more stuff coming for this. As I said, the US is not terribly developed because you have seen it several times in gangster games, in Call of Cthulhu games, and plenty of other stuff. But England is mentioned, of course, but mostly because of the British Empire, not really England.
There are other games to talk that focus on that.
So those parts of the world that are usually focused in games taking place in this time, I just left them. Well, they are mentioned, they are described, the events, but not many plot hooks for those because that's something that can be explored somewhere else. No, what else should I say about this?
Well, I don't know. Maybe we need to talk. We can go to the part about historical accuracy.
Yeah. Okay. So.
And our own interpretation of it. And
I've talked too much, so now you've talked a little bit about historical accuracy.
Okay, so actually, before Miguel, yesterday I was when Miguel launched the book, I was like, oh, we should talk about how this setting is actually historical accurate. Then you did the blog post today, and of course, it's not historical accurate. We are not pundit, and we don't pretend not to want to be. So our games are light, and they have a pulpish side. This is a mixture of history, so factual, and well, I would call it fantasy, fiction instead of fantasy, and horror, Lovecraftian elements, our own setting. So of course, this is not reality. What we do try to emulate is that pulpish side of the adventures of the time. Like Porto Maltese, like
well, Porto Maltese was not made at the time, but
it reflects the time.
So Hugo Pratt was alive at the time.
Exactly, in opposite to the modern modern games for modern audiences, right? Because one thing that I can't stand is when you see a game like, for example, Call of Cthulhu passed in the 20s, and everybody is a black lesbian cop. This is just an
Yes,
example.
yes, that's true.
It doesn't mean that you cannot be a black lesbian in this setting. Probably not a cop.
Very likely not, because
Very unlikely.
I'm not sure
as
if
a
it
black
was
woman,
even allowed. But I take great care about, well, or at least when I talk about it, when I write about it, I take care to check if
Mhm.
people. So, for example, in the Belle Epoque, we know that women were allowed in college, but not many, obviously.
if
What did they
if
do
you
after
were to
that?
play a woman in college, for example,
It's
because
possible.
normally I'll play a
You were
woman,
aristocrat.
but I need to exactly. I'm not going to say that I'm a poor woman from and I went to college. That makes no sense. How the hell do I enter college? How do I have money? Why do I decided to go to college?
If you really want to do a strong, independent woman in the 19th century, or even, well,
Yes, you can.
in the 1920s, it's probably more likely to do that. But in the 19th century, if you want to do that, you can do that. There were some, not many, but there were some. So do an aristocrat or a bourgeois. Preferably do a unmarried woman, and an heir, because there are no parents anymore, so
She
the
can do
parents
whatever
died,
she wants.
and yes, and she has money, and she can do whatever the fuck she wants. And if she doesn't have an husband, or if her husband is a cuck, because there were many at the time,
Historically accurate.
You can play the wife of a cuck, and maybe.
Well, it is known that in that time, women, one of the ways women got their liberty was by marrying cucks.
Yeah, that's it. So
that way they can do whatever they want,
yeah,
and they
so
could have lovers.
you can, yes, that would be nice, and it'd be interesting, and it'd be historically accurate. But now you say, oh, but yes, that's all very interesting, but I want to play
What
a
was the
mayor
name
of
that
the
had
city,
the
and
black lesbian or gays naval officers in the US
I think
Navy?
it's for Call of Cthulhu.
Yes.
I don't know the name of it, but it's a.
Which is that you could be a gay naval office, but you would want people to know about it because you'd be hanged.
Yes, so that.
Of course, you could bugger your
Yeah.
friends, but you need to do it covertly, or you'll get killed. And it's important to keep this. No, important to keep this accurate.
Yes, that's the kind of thing. If you are going, so the woke would say, but yeah, you are including fantasy elements there. Yeah, okay, so there are ghosts and monsters and whatever. Yeah, but the people don't know they exist, or at least they aren't part of the day-to-day events. Okay, so let's say a Lovecraftian thing. People are not aware that Great Cthulhu lies sleeping underneath the sea, or that there's a colors out of space, or that there are deep ones. Most people don't do it, don't know it, as at least some probably know it. But that's different. So there are otherworldly elements that are introduced in these stories, the same way that they were introduced in stories of the time. The 19th century is very famous for ghost stories, Gothic horror, and the 20s are famous for Lovecraft. And not just Lovecraft, but Lovecraft is probably the most famous, the 20s and 30s. So people were writing, and so let's remind you again. I mean, so Lovecraft is supposed to be a very bad person, and blah 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 blah. Well, but he was writing about otherworldly elements, and so while being a terrible racist, he was also writing about Lovecraftian creatures, which at the time weren't Lovecraftian, but yeah, he was writing about them. So
eldritch creatures.
Yeah, eldritch. So it's possible to be accurate in one thing, but not in the other. Okay, there were no monsters, or maybe there were monsters. I don't know.
Well, perhaps. I don't know. Maybe Cthulhu exists.
Yes, maybe Cthulhu exists, but and obviously there were lesbians. But
it was not
you couldn't say that you were lesbian.
It was not socially accepted.
Yes.
And it could be more interesting for role playing if you want to play a character that is homosexual or a lesbian. Well, that's a secret that she would need to keep hidden. Yeah. So that would be interesting for role playing.
It could.
But let's not pretend that yes, everybody was.
It wasn't accepted.
Or that black people were accepted everywhere they could do. No, so there were racism at the time.
Can you play a black character in the 20s or the 30s? Of course you can. There's no reason you can't. But but I want my character to be a very important person.
Well, you can do
I don't
like
know. Maybe it can be a singer.
Pocket Manel that he's playing a Creole.
Yeah.
But his father was white and rich. And there are no other. It's like playing a woman.
You can play Dumas. You can want to play Dumas. You play Dumas. Okay, let's say he was a real character, a real person. He existed.
Yes, but that was not the norm.
No, it
you
was
don't
not
want
the
to
norm.
pretend that the world was filled with the diversity, although a Corto Maltese is a POC, if he's half gypsy, or a third gypsy.
Kind of, yes. And
But he exists as a fictional character.
This stuff here is full of diversity because it's taking place in, but they aren't important. Well, at least they're important in the places, but they aren't.
Well, if you're playing a campaign in the Mediterranean, you can play an Arab.
Yeah, and if you're playing something in the Caribbean, you can play just people from there, and they can be important people because they are in their own lands. So that's correct. But if you're saying, oh, okay, but I'm going to play a woman and she's a police detective, no, she's not. You're in Cuba, she's not a police detective. She's cleaning her house. So if you are going to play a woman in the Caribbean or an Arab country, you should play a woman from the Western country, not one from there. Same way, if you are going to play, if you want to play a character who is not white but went to college or something like that, it's more likely that he is not from Europe. It's more likely that he was from his own country, and people in Europe will probably not give him the same treatment they will give to someone else who is also an intellectual but white. So that's it. That's things change according to perspectives, and these things are important because you are playing a game that is supposed the society, the background, the environment has to make sense. Because if not, you're actually not. If you're playing Call of Cthulhu only with black, lesbian, strong, independent women that are all police officers, then why the hell are you playing in the 20s or the 30s? You're playing today. If you want to play today in Seattle, you can play it today in Seattle. You don't have to go back to the 20s and say, well, but this was always like this. No, it wasn't. Oh, but you have terror in there. Well, okay, so but terror is not like everybody is a deep one. No, unless you're playing in or everybody's a cultist. Yeah, so if you are going to play a campaign that where people live in a town and there are deep ones all around you, and then again saying not Innsmouth, somewhere else. Okay, so New York, 20% of the population are deep ones. You're not playing horror. You're playing fantasy, and that's silly. Okay, so it's the same thing as black, trans, lesbians, or whatever, accepted by everybody else. It's the same as deep ones accepted by everyone else. They weren't at the time. Deep ones weren't because they don't exist. But probably wouldn't be a yes, they monsters. Yeah, that fishy monsters that smell like trout wouldn't be accepted. Black lesbians, yeah, they existed, obviously, but they weren't accepted. Probably they weren't accepted even by their peers, because not because they were black, but because they were lesbians. So don't be silly. Someone on Twitter was saying something about I should have mentioned that when I wrote the post or the sheet or whatever it's called, that I should have mentioned. Yeah, but when people buy it, they can do whatever they want. Yes, of course they can. If you are a wokist and you purchase any of our settings, we want to turn all the characters into indigenous lesbians or yeah, we can stop with your game. You bought it. We're not going to say you cannot play the fuck what you want. Don't play this game. Well, no, buy it if you want to. I think you should buy it, and you can also burn it if you want. Buy it, burn it. Yes. I don't care. You can also steal it if you want, but then you have to find someone to steal it from. But we're not going to pretend, though. We're not going to say that this game is so in case you can buy it by mistake. So if you bought it by mistake, it's not our fault because we're very. We tell people about we don't pretend. So yeah. So I want you to buy it. I don't care who you are. Are you a Nazi? Are you a trans black lesbian? Are you a cat? Are you? This is the first one. Zula. Yes, this time. This is Zula. Meet Zula. She's the mother of the little bastard. But little bastard, I don't think is going to show up. Well, anyway, you can buy it. I think you should buy it, even if you hate it. But don't expect us
And play it
to
however you want
pander.
to be, of course.
Yeah. If you want to play it wrong, you can play it wrong. Everybody can.
That's why you shouldn't tell people if you are blah blah blah, don't buy this game.
Yeah, that's stupid.
No, buy it. You buy it and play it whatever you, however you want.
We just we write it as we want it to be played.
And we suggest how we think it should be played,
Yeah.
But this is something that nobody can control.
Do you want to buy a Wretched game and do dungeon crawls? You can do that. You have to do the dungeon crawls yourself because you're not doing them. But yeah, why not?
Well, I have a couple of dungeons.
Yeah, a couple of dungeons. Yeah. Okay, so is that the thing you like, but for some reason you also want to introduce elements from Wretched? Why not? Do it. We're not going to start doing dungeon crawls constantly, but if you want to take the work to do them, yeah, okay, why not? And if you want, well, that's not going to happen. We are blocked by everybody and we are not at drive-through, so it's very unlikely that someone is going to buy a Wretched game and say, oh, but this is not inclusive, there's no diversity, there's no equity, no, it's not going to happen. But if it happens, be our guest, do whatever you want. Play everything as you like it. Okay. What else?
Yeah, I think nothing else. I think it's enough. We can close for today.
But there's something else that I should like to add. I'm already thinking about something, and I'm mentioning because I think it can be interesting, and if someone watches this until the end, maybe can be commented on that. There's a real person, a real character. Yeah, check if Judd is watching this to the end. There's a real character, a real person called
there was
Reinaldo what's something else Ferreira. Well, anyway, he was called he was
you know that Americans probably can pronounce
Ferreira. But they can pronounce what I'm going to call him next. So he was known as Reporter X. Reporter X is a very interesting person because he was a journalist, or at least initially he was a journalist. Eventually he became a writer, and he wrote obviously news articles, but he had a peculiarity about him. He was too creative. So he tended to come up with stuff that never happened. And he wrote about it. So he had a magazine for several years. It's called Reporter X, where he published articles about things that never happened. Some of the things that happened, some were slightly exaggerated, others were totally bogus. Others mixed several things. There was reality in there, but also some fiction. And I thought
this is in the time period, right?
And yes, so the guy died in the 30s or 40s. So and his career was somewhere in the 1920s and 30s. So this is perfect for this. I had been saving his the issues I had of that magazine. Well, not physical issues, digital ones. And I wanted to do something with this. And now I'm going to do something with this. So I'm going to use it as plot hooks because some of them are very interesting. I'm going to slightly change them because he had because he was Portuguese and he was writing for a Portuguese audience, he tended to locate everything in Portugal. It would be a little bit strange if everything came back to Portugal. So I'm going to locate stuff in other places. But let's say that as a kind of a reference about this, he brought issues of the time, but then he connected them to other things that were happening in Portugal. So I'll have to do this into other places. But the guy has interesting ideas. There were some of his stories that were people tried to make them into movies, but we never had a movie industry that was good. Well, at the time, probably it was better than now. And he wrote some books. the guy was extremely prolific. Apparently, once he wrote a whole novel sitting at a coffee table because he had made a bet with someone. So the guy was very creative and very prolific.
More than you.
Yes, much more than I. So I'm going to steal from him. Just to announce that, and there will be a kind of, it won't be adventures or scenarios. It will be
In a magazine
plot
format,
twists.
it will be
Yes,
really
I'll try to
interesting.
do a magazine format with a 1920s or 1930s look. It probably will be. I'll try to do that the best I can. So that's something that will be that's planned already for Interbellum in the near future. Okay, that's the announcement.
That's it.
That's it for today. Bye bye.
Bye bye.